Okay, so I was walking around in my backyard out here by the pool, and I noticed this plant. I don't know what this plant is called, but it has a very beautiful shape to it. It's a fractal. It's a spiral. It's one of those golden ratio things. I don't know exactly the right words for it, but it's really beautiful. And for some reason, that pattern, for some reason, like the proportions of it, for some reason, kind of remind me of a pot leaf. I know it doesn't make any sense because, like, there's very little similarity between that and a pot leaf if you compare them side by side, but at the same time, and it's not just because I know that they're the same ratio, because that's the way that nature works, but it's because for some reason there's shaking too much, that's annoying. There's a similarity in the aesthetic. I don't know exactly how to explain it. I mean, I could look at almost anything in the plant world and the leaves on this thing. They have a very like if an artist made that, that's a very high quality artist. That's like a very a craftsman who could make something that perfect is like a master, like beyond master. Like the spacing between these different things, the spacing between each of the little petals, the fact that all the petals are like exactly the same size, the direction all the petals are pointing, like look at that, they're all pointing like slightly up and to the left there. Like everything about that is so perfect. And you know, it's not just there. I mean, you look around at all the plants, all the animals in the world, and they all, and you can find several examples of the golden ratio in the human body and in animal bodies and all these plants. But I think it shows up in places that we don't even know about. And there's probably more than just the golden ratio. There's probably also other ratios that are very important in like this leaf, this branch here. Like the ratio of the distance between the little petals and the distance between each sub branch is probably a particular very important mathematical ratio. The interesting thing is that these ratios are mathematical because it's like you're looking at automatically generated patterns. Sorry. It's a pine cone. And it's got the exact same quality as that thing, and it's also got the same quality as basically everything else in the entire world. So I think that's a really incredible thing. I think that's like honestly the most interesting thing, because sure, you have DNA, and DNA can code for things. Like look at the spiral, the similarity between those two spirals. Oh, it's out of focus. It sucks. I don't know how to fix it. It's on my phone. Oh, maybe I do. There we go. I guess it does do focus with touch. That's awesome. Okay. But yeah, those are the exact same spiral right there. And that is a pattern that is fundamental to like every little thing, everything in the entire world, everything that's alive. I mean, I don't think it applies to rocks. However, it might apply to the way that the rocks distribute themselves when they lay on top of each other like that. It may have something to do with that. It is all based on mathematics and geometry. I mean, this golden ratio spiral is the ideal of like it, in order to get the most, well, sunlight a lot of the time, but in these cases I just wonder, like, what is that in order to get the most of? And then I just think, well, what is DNA doing? DNA is based on this pattern. I mean, the way that it, and that's a really interesting thing. Like, how could, okay, I can give you that everything's based on this code, but how come this code produces these perfect spirals and these perfect, beautiful things? Like a pot leaf. If you've ever like actually looked for a long time at a pot leaf, it's like the most beautiful freaking thing in the entire world. Some more examples. These are a little bit harder to see, but I'm sure that each one of these branches has the exact same pattern to it. Each one of these major branches probably has an entire one of those spirals. In fact, every plant is probably, I mean, just based on my memory of all the plants, not grass, but then again, maybe in a certain way, but it seems like every plant has those are fake. Every plant has these, it's not different fractals. It's not like there's these different kinds of fractals. There is one primary fractal that all the other ones are based on. Here we go. This plant, well, it seems that they all grow on top, so that might be a little bit different. It seems like this plant is meant to like lay out like that, and so they all grow upwards. And then I think, well, is that half of the golden ratio, or is that a different ratio? I don't know. So maybe I'm wrong. But no, I can tell just by looking at that, like right, like in here, and like the ratios between the different angles and stuff. I can tell that it matches the pattern that you see in basically everything. Anywhere DNA touches, DNA seems to have this effect of causing things to grow based on this golden ratio spiral fractal. I don't know how that works. I think that's a really, really deep mystery that's going to require a ridiculous amount of knowledge in order to understand why that happens. I don't know if it's even possible that we're ever going to understand how DNA code produces these fractals, this one exact golden ratio fractal. And it's everywhere. It's in every living thing. And there's lots of examples of it existing in non-tangible qualities such as human beings, like the hand, or animals, or no, I mean non-tangible aspects. So like the ratio, I think it was some, oh gosh, I forgot, but it was like the ratio of males to females in a certain, I know with humans that the ratio of males to females is like 50-50, but I know that, I'm just saying that there's the golden ratio appears in a lot of non-tangible qualities. If I could, I would turn the camera around, but unfortunately it doesn't have that feature. I don't really want to hold it backwards either, because that's just weird. But so I'm just saying the golden ratio probably exists in like the stock market or places like medical statistics and stuff like that. Like you can probably find the golden ratio in places where you'd never expect it, and like there might be more than the golden ratio. I guess I can put one of those pine cones back on the screen in order to ooh, that one has a nasty bug inside of it, just to have something for you to look at while you're watching this, whoever you are. Yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the golden ratio exists in a lot of other places. And as I've said before, since it's a fractal, there's lots of different ratios to it, not just the golden ratio. That's kind of like the primary one, but I think that there's some secondary ratios. They may actually be based on the golden ratio mathematically, but they are they go along with it. They may not be based on it mathematically. They may be unique. I'm not really sure, but they go along with it, but it, really it doesn't express itself. So, I mean, it is not encoded so much in what am I trying to say? Yeah, it's not so much encoded in a ratio, in just one number. I mean, this is why pi is this weird transcendental number, because geometry kind of, unfortunately, it transcends numbers. It would be really easy for mathematics if geometry didn't transcend numbers, because then pi would be like 3 instead of 3.14 or whatever, ... It's not just 3.14, but I think that so it's not just the golden ratio. It's a particular fractal, which the golden ratio is a very important aspect of this fractal, but the fractal itself is not merely the golden ratio. The fractal itself is kind of like this pine cone, but there's probably a lot more to it than that, because if it's able to produce things like human beings, there's a lot more complexity to this fractal than the pine cone. And then I think, well, if reality itself is a fractal, then this pine cone is sort of a fractal baby of the entire reality, as is my hand. But they are it's like comparing it's like maybe the human body is the entire Mandelbrot set, and this pine cone is just like one of the little well, then I'd have to wonder, where is the human body located on the surface of this pine cone? And that seems like a really ludicrous, wacky question. But if reality is a fractal, which I suspect that it is, then there must be some mathematical transformation between a human body and a pine cone. And then I think, well, the pine cone is really only part of the human body. And I think, oh yeah, there's the pineal gland. The pineal gland looks just like a pine cone, and I think it might even have this fractal to it. So maybe that's where it is. Oh, that's funny, because that's a well-known thing about the human body. It's supposedly some kind of spiritual thing, but I don't know about that, because I don't see any evidence of it. It's just a part of the brain that they found, that there's only one of them, and I don't necessarily think that is like special or anything, but I mean, there's definitely a use for the pineal gland, but I don't know what it is. I don't claim to know what it is. Most people who talk about the pineal gland claim to know exactly what it's for, and nobody in science actually knows that yet. So, well, actually, no, in science they do know partially what the pineal gland does, and one of those things is that it produces melatonin, I believe, and it probably produces a couple other things. A lot of people think that it produces DMT, but that is, I don't know if that is completely scientifically proven. I think that comes from the pituitary gland, I think. And then I think, well, is the pituitary gland two things or just one thing? I don't know. Anyway, something about this fractal also reminds me of the reproductive system. I'm not really sure what part. It's like the eggs, or the ovium, or what is it called? I forgot what it's called. It's a female it's not really genital. It's like, it's reproductive. It's inside the body. There's something kind of similar to this shape in there. So I think, well, so the human body has pine cones inside of it. But does the pine cone have a human body inside of it? Well, a tree is a lot more than just a pine cone. I mean, a pine cone is just part of a tree, and the tree, like they have the same exact DNA. This is a part of that, and so perhaps that is somehow the object which transforms into the human body when you take that DNA and transform it onto human DNA, at least in its ideal image. And I think, here's another question: is the physical form of an organism the ideal form that the DNA codes for? And I look at this pine cone and say, well, it has this curve to it. It has this curve in a certain direction. And I think, well, maybe that curve was produced accidentally as a result of the way that the pine cone grew, which was a result of environmental factors, which I go into the way that fetuses form in the womb. They have, I just wonder how much of what we look like is based on the DNA, and how much of it is based on the way that our bodies form. But back to the pine cone real quick. This curve in it. It's interesting because I feel like I've seen three-dimensional fractals, mathematical ones, or even two-dimensional fractals that have these portions off to the side sometimes that are curving in certain directions. Well, a pot leaf is a really good example because as the leaves go down, they all curve in a certain direction. I think they do. Well, if a pot leaf isn't a good example, then there's many other examples of that happening in nature where the pieces that form that are kind of off to the side have a bit of a curve to them. The ones in the middle are perfectly straight, and they're like a very ideal form of that fractal. So I'm saying, well, DNA seems to sort of encode for a fractal, or at least a portion of the fractal. The entire fractal is the universe, it's reality. But DNA sort of codes for these smaller portions of it. And there's smaller portions still, like this pine cone, of the DNA of that tree. It's all very, very fascinating. Like, it's so great that reality is this complicated. We're never going to really figure all this stuff out. It's so amazing. But it seems like DNA codes for these fractals. Are there irregularities? Well, there's an irregularity right there, but I don't know if that's because of environmental factors, or if that is a growth pattern, or if that is because of or if that's just, I did that, or if that happened when it hit the ground or something. I don't know. But the curve of it, I wonder, is that curve coded in there? Like, maybe there's pine cones on other parts of the tree which curve in a different direction. That's a very interesting thing for science to study, is why do pine cones sometimes curve like this when other pine cones, oh, well, this one curves a little bit too. But I wonder, did they curve in the same direction? You can't tell now because they've hit the ground and you can just turn them. But why do they curve? And why do they curve in that direction? And I know that somehow there's a relation between the curvature of a pine cone and the entire fractal of the tree. And it's all encoded in DNA, but it comes to us in the form of a fractal, which is, I just think that's incredible, because like the Mandelbrot fractal, for example, is coded based on a very, very simple mathematical algorithm. Very simple, like two symbols that basically mean exactly the same thing. So it's kind of like one symbol, really. Or I guess there's two if you count the equals sign, but oh, and there's also a 2 in there. So, but anyway, the Mandelbrot fractal is based on such a simple algorithm, but you look at the DNA. DNA seems to produce fractals, but DNA is very complicated. It's like I don't know. It's like trillions and trillions of symbols. Or maybe not symbols, but parameters. The genes are the parameters. Genes are like bytes. And what are they called? Genotypes, or you know, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, those are all like bits, but it's not bits, it's like quarts, because it's a quaternary instead of binary. And ooh, this is a pretty one, but it's all soggy. It's not so much pretty in its color or texture, but its fractal is a little bit different than the other one. I mean, its shape. This one's pretty straight too. It doesn't curve all that much. And I wonder, maybe this came from the very top of the tree. Maybe the ones at the top of the tree curve straight up. The ones at the left side of the tree, maybe they curve that way. And the ones on the right side of the tree, maybe they curve that way. And on that side of the tree, maybe they curve that way. And on this side of the tree, maybe they curve this way. Maybe the ones closer to the bottom of the canopy, I suppose it's called, the ones closer to the bottom of the canopy, maybe they curve a lot stronger. And the ones at the top, maybe they curve a lot weaker. At the very top, they're perfectly straight. That's just a theory. That's just a, well, no, that's more like a prediction. That's a prediction. I don't know if that's actually true because I haven't looked. I mean, I guess I could look right now. Let's look at these guys. Oh man, the camera cannot see them though. Well, I'm a little bit worried because what I'm seeing initially is that some of the ones right here are curving and some of them are not. But there's an intuition that I'm putting into this idea that's based on a fractal that I've seen. One particular fractal, it's like a leaf, and it's straight in the middle, and then the sides are all kind of curved. I don't know what that one's called, but I know that I'm talking about a pattern that's really common in fractals. Trees definitely are fractals. So basically reality is a quaternary based fractal generating system that has all of these parameters, genes, and really the hardest question is organizing the genome, because I guess this isn't a real horse, but it's got the same anatomy of a real horse, I suppose. That's the same fractal. I mean, it's the same pattern. It's just using different parameters. I think that the ability for DNA to form fractals is based in it's not based in the code of the DNA, but it's simply a fact of reality. And I think that is, it's almost to the point where it's a spiritual fact about reality, because even though it really is scientific, but it has to do with the geometry of nature. And how is it spiritual? Well, it's spiritual because it's something that exists naturally, not in a physical form, but in a form of this pattern that pervades all of reality. It has nothing to do with the fact that DNA is coded to make fractals like this. It has to do with the way that the genes become the object, the organism. There's a process in between the DNA and the object, and that process turns a string of parameters into a fractal. And I'm just thinking, because reality doesn't just have the code. Reality also has the coding language. And that's what I'm talking about. The coding language is what creates these golden ratio fractals. There's a coding language that reads the DNA. The coding language which reads the DNA and produces the organism, that is a spiritual thing. And, well, I could go on and on and on rambling, but I don't really know anything more. Like, when you get to the point where you are saying that there's a spiritual quality to some factor of reality, at that point, I don't really think that there's much more that you can do, because it's outside of science at that point. This is a really interesting one. It almost looks like a dead cockroach. Isn't that interesting? Looks like a cockroach rolled up. So I guess that's a fractal echo. Almost certainly. So the interrelation between the DNA of the tree that creates this and the cockroach is a fractal echo of the primary fractal, which connects all of this. Like, nothing is disconnected. This is something that nobody realizes. There's no space between that house and me. That space is just three-dimensional. In 4 dimensions, everything is all one object. Every atom is all connected through time to all the other atoms, because at the very beginning, at the Big Bang, it's all homogeneous. It's all one thing, and everything in reality is just these branches sprouting off of the Big Bang. Including human beings. Like, you are not this object with these 4 limbs and this outline that goes all the way around you. Like, that's what you think you are, but you're only living in the 3 dimensions. In 4 dimensions, you are not outlined. There's no edges. There's a tail that goes this way and a tail that goes that way. And the tail that goes into the future, I suppose it just ends when you die. I suppose that's the tip. That's like the top of the tree is death. But the base of the tree, the fractal that is you, is birth. You are not, and your birth is obviously connected to your parents, and your parents are connected to their parents, which are connected all the way back to all the ancestors, connected back to the ape-like ancestors, which go back to the marsupials or whatever came before that, which go back to the amphibians, which go back to the fish, which go back to the worms. I guess. I mean, I don't really know the exact names for all these things. And then before that, there was the filter feeding things, and then before that, there was like fungus or something, and then before that, there was probably single-celled amoeba-like things. Before that, nobody really knows. I mean, at a certain point, you get to the place where science doesn't know. And so, perhaps the relation between, say, that one that I found on the ground that looks like a cockroach and a cockroach is in the DNA that the cockroach and the pine cone share. And then I think, well, the one of the most interesting things in genetic science is that there's a code, there's a particular code that's really, really long that all life shares. And I think, well, that must mean that the original branch, the trunk of the tree of everything, was a creature which only had that code. Like, even viruses share that code. Everything is based on that code. That code is like God. That's like the God code. And the very first creature had that code. And I'm like, what science is probably never going to really understand is the process of going from planets and magma and like iron and silicates and stuff to and water and like organic chemistry. How does that transform into that initial God code, which becomes everything? It becomes all of this, everything here, including the houses and the grass and these little things here and my feet, like everything. So there was a Big Bang, and then there was a kind of a second Big Bang in which this God code was created, which created basically, that first creature, that one that has the DNA that all life shares, that's basically, you could call it God, you could call it like Adam and Eve. And I wonder, is that thing sexual? It must be sexual. It has to be sexual in some way in order for it to reproduce. So, but did it reproduce asexually? I'm saying, was it in a binary? Was there a male and a female? I don't know. Everything here except for the clouds and some of the materials. But the fact that the materials that are dispersed in this way is a uniquely human thing. And that means that it's based on that initial DNA. It really is. Like computers, the internet, memes on the internet, sports statistics, every little thing that isn't simply material. The only things in this video are the clouds and the sky. Those are the only things that are not based on this. Those are based on a very much more primitive and old programming language, which is basically, that came before the God creature, the Adam and Eve creature. That is what created them. So that's an even older God there than this God, or the one that's talking right now. In fact, I'm pretty much the newest one. I mean, if you consider my consciousness and the fact that I'm here right now, I'm pretty much the newest thing in the universe. Of course, you could say that there are babies that are being born this instant. They're newer than I am, but I am not my birthday. I'm not my birthday. And so I'm right now. I'm right now. And gosh, that's an interesting thing. I guess this is like one of the most interesting little conversations that I've had. I don't want it to go on much longer because I've got to get to my life. This is a distraction, but it's very interesting. And of course I'm not done talking about this, but I'm just saying, everything is one. Everything is one thing. There's not multiple things. There's no separation between different things. That air conditioner on top of the roof is completely connected to this pine cone. They are one thing. They are different. They're two different branches on the same tree. You know, these ducks here and my feet, they're the same object. The clouds, those clouds up there are the same object. They're not based on the branch of life, but they are a different branch. They are a much older branch, the branch of physics. The entire universe is all one thing, including the mind. And that is where it gets really difficult. That's where it gets really philosophical. There's no longer any science to it. It's purely spiritual. But it's the connection between the mind and the physical. That place, I don't understand. I don't know how to talk about it. But I know that there is a connection because everything is one thing. There's not two things. It's not dualism. But that's a little bit off the topic of the video, and I don't want to make this way too long, so I'm just going to end it there.